Who was Franz Boas? Okay, so Franz Boas was a German-American anthropologist. This was the guy that took the science. He took the direct scientific empirical aspects of anthropology and threw them out the window in search of a more friendly idea towards anthropology that is not really scientific at all. His name is Franz Uri Boas, and he was a German-American anthropologist. Now, when I was in school for criminal justice, one of my professors was a woman that went by the name Dr. Rabbi Renee Tobin. Okay? Now, she was a big fan of people like Boas here. One time she spent a whole juvenile justice class, which was one of my classes she taught. The whole class she spent trying to disprove Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection because it was not fair and it had nothing at all to do with the course curriculum. Not really. I mean, outside the small amount of the course curriculum that dealt with what's called biological positivism, the theory of evolution had very little, if anything, to do with that. And really, the only mention of biological positivism in that textbook was to recap. It had nothing to do with, the course material. But we had to hear how Charles Darwin was not a fair person. Tell you what. Oh, he had notable ideas: cultural relativism, four-field approach, yada, yada, yada. Studying in Germany, Boas was awarded a doctorate in 1881, blah, blah, blah. This is the guy that worked with Margaret Mead, early life and education, son Sophie Meyer, yada, 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 da. You can read this on your own. I want to get into the type of the so-called anthropology, which is not anthropology, that he promoted. So what is cultural relativism? Cultural relativism is the idea that a person's beliefs and practices should be understood based on that person's own culture. Proponents of cultural relativism also tend to argue that the norms and values of one culture should not be elevated using the norms and values of another. Now, this is the concept of saying that, this was done to say that, the civility of Western civilization is not, it's not better. Our civility is not better than the savagery of another country or the savagery of another civilization. But what's interesting about that is the same people that adopt cultural relativism and say that we can't judge people for their cultural differences are the same people that wish to impose their ideas of gender equality and things like that on Western society, where gender equality has a pretty good history of being practiced. It was established axiomatic in anthropological research by Franz Boas, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so let's look up Boasism. Okay, so let's see, where's his form of anthropology? Boas, now if you read The Culture of Critique, I do recommend people read The Culture of Critique. Boas is one of those people that can easily be seen as somebody that devitalized anthropology for the purpose of political gain. Boas, for some unknown reason, vocally opposed anti-Semitism and refused to convert to Christianity, but he did not identify himself as a, quote, Jew. This is disputed, however, by Ruth Bunzel, a protege of Boas, who called him the essential Protestant. He valued autonomy above all things. According to his biographer, he was an ethnic German, preserving and promoting German culture and values in America. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. When he started his university studies, Boas had attended Heidelberg, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Science as activist. Okay, this is the thing. When something becomes activism, when it becomes ideological, it is no longer science. There are two things to which I am devoted, he said: absolute academic and spiritual freedom, and the subordination of the state to the interests of the individual, expressed blah 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 blah. Boas was known for passionately defending what he believed to be right. Boas combated racism, berated anthropologists and folklorists who used their work to cover for espionage, worked to protect German and Austrian scientists who fled the Nazi regime, and openly protested Hitlerism. So as you can see, he is an activist. He is an activist, not a scientist. Many social scientists and other disciplines often agonize over the legitimacy of their work as science and consequently emphasize the importance of detachment, objectivity, abstraction, and quantifiability. So note, science needs these things to be science. It needs to have detachment, objectivity, abstraction, and quantifiability. But Boas, like other early anthropologists, was originally trained in the natural sciences. He and his students never expressed such anxiety. Moreover, he did not believe that detachment, objectivity, and quantifiability was required to make anthropology scientific. So, empiricism is not necessary for something to be empirical. Science is not necessary for something to be scientific, according to Boas. Keep that in mind. Boas was especially concerned with racial inequality, which his research had indicated is not biological in origin, but rather social. Boas is credited as the first scientist to publish the idea that all people, including white and African Americans, are equal. The thing is, and this is the thing, how can he make that judgment if he says you can't judge people based on your standards? He is making a judgment call. This goes against his own concepts of people not judging things, He often emphasized his abhorrence of racism, Again, this is activism. This is not science. He used his scientific work that there was no scientific basis for such bias. Boas began by remarking that if you did accept the view that the present weakness of the American is his uncontrollable emotions, his lack of energy, blah blah blah, your work would be notable one. He then went on, however, to argue against this view, to claim that European and Asian civilizations are at the time more advanced than other civilizations. Boas objected that so he's again breaking his own rules. So, blah, blah, blah. Boas then went on to call advances in Africa, such as smelting iron and domesticate. Now, this is the thing. Domesticating chickens, cattle that occurred in Africa well before the spread to Europe. So he admits that you can domesticate chickens and cattle. He admits that there's genetic bases for domestication, I would assume, because you can't ignore that. But yet there's not genetic differences for behavior in people for some reason. That's magical. Let's move on. Boasian anthropologists. Margaret Mead, we've already been through. So I want you to see these. These are all activists. Well, most are activists. This is an activist form of anthropology. It is not real anthropology. Critiques. Boasian anthropology came under critique both from those students who wanted to reintroduce the evolutionary process because it's kind of integral to the study of apes and humans when you're trying to study the culture of apes and humans as well as the biological phenotype, how the phenotype came about, what is the genotype behind the phenotype, and understanding the epigenome. You kind of need biology in anthropology. And from those who disagree with its relativistic stance and view that biological differences did not reflect innate differences in human ability or potential, in the late 20th century, early Boasian anthropology was also critiqued for its acceptance of race as a valid biological category, leading to attempts to redefine a neo-Boesian anthropology which studies the particular historical trajectories leading to the construction of social categories of cultures and races, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Now, feminist theology is funny because it has to change the religions that it states to be practicing, but feminist theology is, of course, found in any religion: Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Neo-paganism, Baha'i, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and New Thought, to reconsider traditions, blah, 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 within specific religions. Jewish feminism is a movement that seeks to make religious, political, and social status of Jewish women equal to that of Jewish men. Feminist movements, and with varying approaches and successes, have opened up within all major denominations of Judaism. Some of these theologians promote the idea that it is important to have a feminine characteristic of God within Siddur. The issue that you have with this, at least in the sense, well, I don't want to get too into it. Yahweh, or Yud-Ha-Viv-Ha, but Yahweh is a masculine figure. But when you get into a deeper understanding of Judaism, particularly like a Kabbalistic understanding of Judaism, God does not have a gender. God is genderless. There are more feminine aspects of God and more masculine aspects of God in different aspects of the Sephiroth, which are the different emanations of God. I think it's kind of silly. This is the problem I have with feminism and MGTOW or patriarchal stuff or any of that. I don't think that feminism or the patriarchy match reality. I think that men and women are equal, and I think that's how it should be explored, not one being put over the other artificially, whether it's artificially putting men over women or artificially putting women over men. I believe that the Jewish concept of God as being neither gender, as being, neither is a good concept, and it meshes with my pantheistic understanding of God, as well as my understanding of Brahmanism. But moving on, and that's why I actually accept the concepts of Brahmanism and scientific pantheism, and what I would call pantheistic monism. I don't see the source of reality, so to say, the ultimate source of reality, as either masculine or feminine. And in fact, how could it be if both masculine and feminine exist? Okay? So, Christian feminism is an aspect of feminist theology which seeks to advance, understand the equality of men and women morally, socially, spiritually, and in leadership from a Christian's perspective. Blah, blah, blah. Christian egalitarianism, blah, blah, blah. Islamic feminism is a form of feminism concerned with the role of women in Islam. It aims for a full equality of all Muslims regardless of gender. Now, this is the thing. You would have to completely alter the concepts in these religions. Now, this is why I think organized religion is a mess. I don't believe in organized religion. I think it's not really that great of a thing. Sikhism, women are equal to men, generally speaking. Okay, so that's, why even bother with feminism? Hinduism, women have held in equal honor to men. This is not accurate, okay? Now, there was more equality of women forcibly enforced by the British. Before the British got to India, women were burning themselves alive on the funeral pyres of their husbands. Neo-paganism, what's funny about neo-paganism, Wiccan paganism, for example, everybody knows that Wicca in the beginning, it was a reimagining of the Neolithic Anglo-Saxon religion. There was a horned god of the hunt and the female god, and these were seen as two aspects of the one deity. Okay, now what's kind of interesting about this is feminism hijacked and altered Wicca and destroyed it. Buddhism, and I'm going to show this, Buddhism, a lot of feminists like to take up these kooky Eastern religions or Islam or Hinduism or any of these. These religions are actually less pro-woman than you might think. Okay, and I'm going to show why. Now, people not familiar with the Bible, this is Corinthians 11:7. A man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and the glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man. This is what I'm saying. For feminist theology to exist, they have to alter the whole concept of the religion. Corinthians 11:9, I think it's 11:9. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. 11:10. For this reason, and because of the angels, the woman ought to have a sign of authority on her head. Okay. Some sexist quotes from the Bible here. Okay, this is about menstruation. Everything on which she lies during her menstrual impurity shall be unclean. Everything also on which she sits shall be unclean. Okay. Women aren't equal. This is what I'm saying. You would have to alter the core beliefs of the religion in order for it to be feminist, which is why I don't agree with organized religion. I believe it's time to move on to a naturalistic outlook, a naturalistic pantheism, to look at things like Spinoza's ethics, to look at things like Emerson, to look at things, these naturalistic pantheisms as opposed to this these traditional nonsense religions. But women aren't equal. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. Timothy 2:12. If something happens, if there is a young woman, a virgin already engaged to be married, and a man meets her in the town and lies with her, you shall stone them to death. The young woman because she did not cry for help, and the man because he violated his neighbor's wife. If the woman is not engaged, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Let's read that again. If there is a young woman, a virgin, already engaged to be married, and a man meets her in the town and lies with her, you shall stone them to death, the young woman because she did not cry for help, and the man because he violated his neighbor's wife. If the woman is not engaged, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Virginity test. But if this be true, if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of the city shall stone her with stones that she die. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 22, 20, and 21. Okay. Women are property of men. Okay, so wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands. No, so why bother trying to alter these religions with feminism? Okay, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. Okay? Sexism in the Quran. Okay, and if you fear that you will not be in dealing with the orphans, then marry of other women as may be agreeable to you, 2 or 3 or 4, and if you fear, for you will not be able to do justice, then marry only one, or marry what your right hand possesses. Thus it is more likely that you will not do injustice. God commands you concerning your children, a male shall have as much as the share of 2 females, but if there be females only numbering more than 2, then they shall have 2/3 of what the deceased leave. And this is about unequal, okay. If you fear high-handedness from your wives, remind them of the teaching of God, then ignore them when you go to bed, then hit them. So this is actually encouraging people to beat their wives. If they obey you, you have no right to act against them. God is most high and great. Okay? So, if your wives obey you, you don't have a right to act against them, but if they don't obey you according to this certain book, you have the right to hit them. Men are guardians over women because God has made some of them excel others, and because men spend on them their wealth. So virtuous women are obedient and guard the secrets of their husbands with God's protection. And as for those on whose part you fear disobedience, admonish them and keep away from them in their beds and chastise them. Then, if they obey you, seek not a way against them. So as long as women obey men, I will say this, as long as women obey men, it does seem that Islam doesn't allow you to do anything nasty to them, which is sort of better than Judaism or Christianity. I will say that. They ask thee for a decision. God gives his decision concerning kalalalala. If a man dies leaving no child and he has a sister, then she shall have half of what he leaves, and he shall inherit her if she has no child. But if there be 2 sisters, then they shall have 2/3 of what he leaves. And if the heirs be brethren, but both men and women, then the male shall have as much as the portion of 2 females. Okay? I don't feel like going through all this. It's a little boring. But yeah, I'm going to move on now. Sexism in Buddhism. Okay, position of women in Buddhism has been debated for a long time. Blah, blah, blah. Conclusion. The role of women in Buddhism is considered to be less important compared to men. There is a very small room for women in Buddhism. Women have always been considered as dependent assets and have been given lesser roles, but today's women have proved themselves to be extraordinary. They have proved to be well ahead of these roles. They have deserved a greater and an equal role. Okay, what they deserve and what they have are 2 different things. To attain Buddha status, meaning to attain actually becoming Buddha or a Bodhisattva, the ultimate goal of the religion, a woman must become a man by dying and being reborn. But in many Buddhist texts, an advanced practitioner of Buddhism might miraculously change her form in this life at her own will. So the only way that so I guess now with transgenderism, I guess a Buddhist woman could just become a man through a surgery and then achieve Buddhahood, I assume. Okay, gender bias in Hinduism. Some time ago, there was a story in the news that a girl in India was physically assaulted by an angry mob, and her mother was beaten to death following an... Now, what I want to point out, the differences in how women are treated in Western civilization versus in Middle Eastern and Eastern civilization is not actually because of the religions. Christianity is just as gender biased, if not more so gender biased, than these other religions, with the exception probably of Buddhism, which seems to be the most gender biased, actually, ironically. But the thing that I would like to point out is it's not that. It's the prevailing culture of the West is more accepting of gender equality than these other things. So if you go by Franz Boas in this hokey-pokey social nonsense anthropology cultural relativism bullshit, we have no right to judge that. We have no right to think that the relative gender equality in the West is superior to the pronounced gender inequality in the East, Middle East, etc., according to Franz Boas. So the brutalization of women is okay because who are we to judge, so to say. So, yeah, there was a woman that was beaten, blah, 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 attacked. It happened in a world and at a time when in countries such as the USA and Canada, both young and older women habitually wear half pants, skirts, shorts, etc. in public for convenience or to look attractive. The public at large do not care and do not consider it a social or moral problem. So keep that in mind. In the United States and Canada, we do not consider women dressing in these ways to be an issue. For most people, it is just a matter of personal taste, choice, convenience, or freedom. There are still people in Hindu communities across the world who believe that women need to be told what they should wear. So keep that in mind. In Hindu communities across the world, there are people who believe that women need to be told what they should and should not wear. Okay, how they should look, or how they should behave in public. They may do it for various reasons, out of concern or fear, or to avoid social pressures, but it is an indication that they are still caught in the past. There are many predators in the country who do not let go a chance to molest women or harass helpless girls in buses and trains, movie theaters, and solitary places. This unfair treatment of women in Hindu society is not a new phenomenon. It has been going on for centuries and millenniums. We are gradually becoming aware of the number of atrocities against women by men because of the 24-hour news cycle and the social media. Now, what's funny is I personally am a big fan of Brahmanism, of the Upanishads. Okay, but the thing is, the prevailing culture in this area is not accepting of the equality of men and women, just like the prevailing culture in the West is more accepting of the equality of men and women. But ironically, Hinduism is not a very accepting religion of women. As I said, until the British imposed it, women were regularly burning themselves to death on the funeral pyres of their husbands. Okay, it is human nature and the vulnerability of human beings to evil conduct. Outwardly, religions seem to be restrictive and encourage orthodox and outdated practices. However, if you dig deeper, you will realize that most of these rules were invented by men, okay, in the name of religion, to control and dominate others. Religion, in my opinion, started as a tool to connect with the divine, and it has been created as a tool to control the stupid. A composite religion such as Hinduism is flexible and gives you freedom to take responsibility for your life and actions. You cannot solely blame it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, moving on.